Welcome to my presentation on African sleeping sickness, also known as human African trypanosomiasis. Outline of my presentation. The background information will be discussed, the vector, where it's found, how it's transmitted, what the causative agent is, diagnosis, symptoms, prevention, and treatment. African sleeping sickness. Also known as African lethargy, it's a parasitic disease caused by the protozoan that is passed to humans via the tsetse fly. It's deadly if not treated, but medication does work if the patient is diagnosed quickly. 30,000 people are currently infected, but it only occurs in 36 sub-Saharan African countries, with 80% of those infections occurring in the Congo. So you know where not to travel when you go to Africa. There are two types of this African sleeping sickness, Eastern and Western, and they're caused by different species of the trypanosome parasite. We'll get into that later. So outbreaks. 60 million people are currently at risk. And there have been several epidemics over the last century. Between 1896 and 1906, 250,000 people died, mostly in Uganda and the Congo Basin. And in 1920, it reemerged in a number of African countries, reaching epidemic levels. The most recent epidemic occurred in 1970 and lasted up to the late 1990s. And this was because in 1960, they thought they had it under control. So they stopped with surveillance and screening, and it reemerged into epidemic proportions again. However, in 2009, cases were under 10,000 for the first time in 50 years. And this is largely due to the involvement of the World Health Organization. They are largely involved in education, screening, and increased access to treatment. The vector, the tsetse fly. So this fly is large, brown, and loves to get its blood meal. It's similar to our common housefly, but it has longer proboscis and a unique wing arrangement. It's both the vector and a host for trypanosome parasites, and these parasites are what cause the African sleeping sickness. They pass on this parasite to both humans and animals from biting infected disease hosts and then feeding on one who is uninfected, almost like a zombie biting a human and then becoming a zombie, and then being able to infect other humans. So the trypanosome is kind of like a zombie parasite. So the tsetse fly, kingdom Animalia, phylum Arthropoda, class Insecta, order Diptera, subsection Calyptratae, superfamily Hippoboscodia, family Glossinidae, genus Glossina. So some species groups that are occurring in Africa include the Morsitan species, which is savanna species, Fusca, the forest species, and Palpalis, the riverine species. These names all reflect where the tsetse fly species are found. So as you can see in this picture, reproduction, they love to make larvae. But they're unique in the sense that they deposit larvae. They don't actually lay eggs. These eggs mature within the female and are supplied with essential nourishment to complete larval development. That's why she requires so many blood meals to maintain, and thus she requires lots of feeding. So that's why this disease is rapidly spread, because the mama needs the blood to nourish her babies. And of course, there's 3 larval instars before they get to the adult form. I spy with my little eye the tsetse fly. Tsetse flies live today in moist savanna and woodlands. And you can see in this orangey reddish region that this is where the tsetse fly is all found. This is also the region where there are lots of cattle in rural areas. So where is it possible to become infected? Well, in any one of these pink or red countries, there are people who are either at risk, endemic, highly endemic, or there's actually an epidemic going on. And you can see in Central Africa, those countries that are in the darkest red are the countries with the highest amount of the disease. And mostly these diseases are being transmitted in rural areas. As you can see in the picture behind, it is a typical rural area in Africa. So, east or west? Western African sleeping sickness is the chronic form of the disease. It's caused by Trypanosoma brucei gambiense. The reservoir is typically humans, so it's passed from tsetse fly to human to tsetse fly to human. However, the eastern form of this disease is the acute form. It's more rapidly occurring in the body, and it's caused by Trypanosoma brucei rhodiensis. And the reservoir is typically cattle. So we can go from cattle to tsetse fly to cattle to tsetse fly to humans back to tsetse fly. But actually 98% of the reported cases are caused by Trypanosoma brucei gambiense, where the reservoir is humans. So that's why it's most commonly spread from human to tsetse fly to human. And you'll see more about that in the life cycle coming up. So, this picture, is this a seahorse with donuts or a Trypanosoma with red blood cells? Well, if you guessed Trypanosoma, you were correct. Trypanosoma brucei rhodiense and Trypanosoma brucei gambiense are members of the order Trypanosomatida. They are protozoans with a single flagellum and all are considered to be parasitic. Due to antigenic variation, Trypanosoma species are able to evade their host immune systems by modifying their surface membranes. They're highly adaptable. They are then able to infiltrate the host's central nervous system where they attack and cause neurological symptoms, including sleep cycle disturbances. So the life cycle, how's it all connected? Well, as you can see in step number 1, the tsetse fly takes a blood meal from the human and injects the trypanosomes into the human. This occurs because after the tsetse fly fed on its first host and the trypanosomes were put into the tsetse fly, when the tsetse fly then regurgitated that blood meal back into the human, the trypanosomes were released. And then the cycle could occur inside the human. So once the trypanosomes reproduce inside the human in its blood, another tsetse fly could come, though it is uninfected, bite the human and receive those trypanosomes from the human. So that happens in step 5, and of course the cycle then occurs inside the tsetse fly where the trypanosomes reproduce, and the cycle of course is repeated over and over again. And this is how the disease is transmitted. So symptoms of the infection. Well, the first phase is the hemolymphatic stage. It has chills, fever, appetite loss, headache, joint pain, itching, swelling of the lymph nodes.